Hey everybody, Greg Carrasco here, doing the third, the third pilot of something that started as a bit of an accident. If you like the content, hit subscribe on the bottom right underneath here. I'm sure that the producer is gonna figure this out. I don't know where it goes. Maybe it goes here or it goes over here or somewhere around here. You'll figure it out. You're smart people. You're watching this. Uh, with me today, I don't even know how to describe these folks because um, I met them in the most unusual of circumstances. About 8 or 9 years ago, um, I had sold my CrossFit gym because I wanted to do something a little bit more physical with my youngest boy. My youngest boy was tiny, and I knew that I wanted to do jujitsu somewhere. So I did my trusted Google search, and there was a jujitsu club inside your gym.
Yeah.
And that was the first time that I walked into your gym there. So with me, I have Daniel Thiesen from Radix Performance and his father, Martin Thiesen. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Definitely.
This is a bit of an unexpected thing this morning because
Impromptu.
this is absolutely impromptu, but I don't think that it could have been a better segue into my morning. I'll explain. I got up at around, I don't know, 7:30 or so. I did a little bit of jujitsu study because I lead the men's group at my jujitsu school. So all the dads show up early in the morning, and the only condition is that you need to be over 40 and new to jujitsu. So I have guys that are 40 and other ones that are 67, 68-year-olds. And there is no greater joy in my life than watching 65, 67-year-olds rolling around and wrestling with other 65-year-olds like boys. I honestly, it brings such a great joy to my life. So from teaching them how to strangle each other, I rushed home, jumped in the shower, got changed, picked up my wife, and I went to church. My first time in church, and I was trying to remember whether it was 32 or 33 years. And the last time I went to church was at a Salvation Army on Kipling and Rexdale. There is a Salvation Army there. And the reason why I was there is because I was so broke and hungry that I was at had a food bank, and I figure, maybe God lives there. But things didn't get any better for me at the time, and things got considerably worse. And I kept on praying and praying and praying, and nothing happened. So, like many Christians, because I come from a very Christian background. My family was back home. They called them Pentecostal Apostólico Evangélicos. So we were evangelical Pentecostals. In natural Christian fashion, we whenever we were in a time of need, we would pray, and we would hope that something would happen. But I wasn't that lucky at the time, or so I thought. So I left the church. I tried to attend the mosque. I read the Quran. I bought a copy of the Torah. I read it too. And nothing was speaking to me at the time. So today was an interesting day for me. And I'm glad that you guys were there to witness this, because I don't think that you understand the amount of soul searching that I had to do to bring my wife and I to go to a church on a Sunday morning. And then I'll pass this along to you guys. Marty, your kids bully me. Your three beautiful sons. Never really telling me to go to church, because I never did. That's not what they do. I say bullying in the most endearing possible way, because it's more like they seduce me into the idea of a higher version of a man. I never thought that in this day and age, and under this political landscape, and in the times that we happen to be living in, there were men that were that good. And perhaps I'm lifting your sons to on a pedestal that maybe they don't feel they deserve, or me, or anyone for that matter. But it was interesting that what brought me back to a church today was not their preachings, it was their actions. What has happened to Christianity? Because so many people have moved away from God, especially in Canada. Canada is becoming more of a secular society. You know, Marty, you've been in church your entire life.
Yes.
You've been a Christian your whole life. Or can you, talk to us a little bit about your testimony? Because during the service this morning, you mentioned that you were brought into church at 11.
Yeah.
What happened?
I was born in Mexico. We came here when I was 8, back of a pickup truck, 13 of us. And we ended up living in a barn because we had no access to a house, a place to rent or anything, and no money.
Yeah.
We barely could pay the guy that was driving the pickup truck.
I'm sorry, but you don't look Mexican to me. What were you doing in Mexico?
There's a colony of Mennonites in Mexico, still are. I've got some relatives still there.
Yeah.
Thousands of Mennonites moved from Western Canada to Mexico because they gave free farmland. And they were hoping, because Mennonites are farmers, that they would come and do something with their dry wasteland. And so thousands of them moved there.
So the guys discovered that was not, hospitable territory for you, and
it's for Mennonites who don't believe in modern technology and all of that. It's just extremely difficult. It's dry. It's hard to make a living there, and so for that reason, the people started leaving again, coming back to Canada.
Which years were this? Like it's put me in a setting. What time and place was this?
So this we came here in 1968.
Okay,
right. So I was 8 years old. And we moved to the Aylmer area, which is up by St. Thomas, close to London. Yeah. And there's a lot of farmers that hire Mennonites from Mexico there. Mm-hmm. And so once we got here, they hired us, and we worked as a family on the farm to get enough money to get our first house to rent.
So how many brothers and sisters were you? And you emigrated up here with your mom and dad?
Yes. There was 13 of us. There's 7 girls, 6 guys.
Wow, that's a big family.
Yeah, and but the unique thing about our story was that my dad was very early in his life, he became an alcoholic. So he got married at the age of 18 and immediately turned to alcohol. He was an alcoholic his entire life. The whole time that he gave birth to, or was part of the birthing process of this family, he was never there. He kept my mother pregnant.
Yeah.
But he was everywhere else. And so what ended up happening is, over time, the Mennonite community literally kicked him out of the community because he was a rebel. He was into drugs and alcohol, and he didn't conform to their ways at all.
Was he a Christian?
God believing,
yeah,
but broken. Just completely broken. And he literally couldn't find a way out. So when we came to Canada, he was one of those angry drunks, so he was always angry, and he would beat us up. Now, my brothers all left, and you could count them one by one. They all left between the age of 13 and 15.
Where do you rank between your brothers?
I'm number 10 out of 13.
So you were one of the youngest one.
Yeah.
You were one of the youngest one, and that must have been a terrible thing to watch. Your father being abusive and drunk. What happened? I mean, how do you find God at the tender age of 11 when you have all the signs at home that, if God was out there, why is this happening here?
In that deep, vulnerable moment at the age of 11, when you're walking down the street and hitchhiking, that's a unique place, right? So in God's design, I think, is what I believe anyway, that the guy that picked me up wasn't another drunk
Yeah.
or like one of my dad's buddies that was just another guy waiting to take advantage of a young kid.
Yeah.
It was a youth pastor. So he pulled over and picked me up.
Mm-hmm.
And so he asked me what's going on. I told him what I was doing. I had no idea where I was going to go. So like, I just wanted to get someplace away. And he told me the most beautiful story. It was just in that vulnerable moment. As a Mennonite kid, we don't go to church. We don't read the Bible. We go to church, but without the Bible.
Really?
Yes, there's no Bible. There's a catechism and rules and regulations, and you can't own land, and you can't do this, and you can't do that. But there's nobody there. Sorry?
You have to wear black.
Yes, and horse and buggy and all that stuff. So it's just a bunch of rules. It's like if you follow these rules, at the end of it, you might get lucky and go to heaven. So that's kind of the mentality of it, right? So nobody ever told me about the love of Jesus, or that was brand new to me.
So this youth pastor picked you up on the side of the road. He asked you, "What are you doing? Where are you going?"
Yeah, totally.
And you told him your experience at the time, and what happened next?
When he told me the story about how much God loves me, and I'm like, that's pretty, as an abused kid, like when you're abused on multiple levels, it's a fantastic idea, right? That somebody would love you. And so he told me the whole story about why he believed that even in my situation, that God had a plan and that he loved me, and so he shared the whole gospel story and everything like that. And I'm like, the only revelation I got at that point is like, wait a minute, maybe there's life after this. Like maybe there's just something there.
Mm-hmm.
But something happened to me in that car where there was a complete change, because I went from wanting to get as far away from my dad as I could to take me back home. Because if what you're telling me is true, then I want to go, and I'm going to saturate my father with that, because that's the kind of love that will change him. And that's the immediate purpose I found him. And I did. He took me right to my driveway, and I went right back into the house, and I went up to my dad and I said, there's only one thing I'm asking of you. Don't touch my sister. Don't touch my younger brother. You can do whatever you want to me, whatever you issues are, take them out on me. But God loves you. And I'm going to serve you till the day you understand that.
That must have been a shock for your dad.
He was sober at the time, so he had to deal with what I just told him. So,
Mm.
yeah, he had to deal with that. Now, what happened after that is literally from 11 to 17 is 6 years that most kids do all the good fun stuff. Was a journey that I wouldn't wish on anybody. But the unique thing was that as a Mennonite kid in Aylmer,
Yeah.
we got picked on and stuff. I mean, people threw beer bottles at us while we were riding our bicycle because there was this crazy attitude towards the Mennonite kids. And it was like we were prey for people that needed something to take out there on every level. Like I'm talking about going down gravel roads, and they would take empty beer bottles by the hundreds and throw them to see if one of them would hit, right?
It's really interesting because Chile is predominantly Catholic. 95% of Chile is devoted Catholic. So evangelicals down there were considered to be crazy. We were the odd man out. We would have something that in Spanish we call puntos, which means that it was a rendezvous place where everybody from church would meet on the street with their banjos and their guitars, and they would just preach. They would stand on the middle of the road and preach the gospel.
Yeah.
And, as a 7, 8, 9-year-old kid, when all your friends are watching you, making fun of you, I know exactly what you mean. There were so many derogatory names that they had for us down there, canutos and all sorts of things that mean awful things. But somehow, and I'll circle back to what you were saying, I was always that kid that could have gone the criminal side of things. I was always that kid because I was always fighting, sort of like your other son here. And but somehow the road became a little straighter because I always felt that there was somebody watching, that there was a different level of accountability that we had, and that stopped me from going astray. Now, your dad heard you that time. Growing up for the following 5, 6, 7 years after that was not a good thing. What happened with your dad?
After that,
Yeah.
he became twice as bad. It kind of, that whole thing, it just turned him into a monster. My younger brother he left really young. Like he left shortly after all this was transpiring, and it left my sister and my mom.
Yeah.
And so my mission for my whole teenage life was to protect them. That's the only thing. Every night was bad. Friday nights were unusually bad. Turning furniture upside down, tables, and taking out knives and doing all that kind of stuff. But it was during that time that God showed me a different side of himself. Like there's just things that happen that are unexplainable that solidified my relationship with God.
Give me an example.
Okay, no problem. Friday night, typical Friday night. My mom's on her knees praying because she's begging for mercy because we know what's coming. And it's my sister's got the furthest bedroom because we designed it that way to keep him away from her. And we're waiting for him to come. And sure enough, the car comes flying into the driveway. He was charged about 15 times with
Drinking and driving.
And back in those days, you could keep getting your license back.
It still happens today. So
for sure. And so, but he would drive and just come flying into the driveway. And I was always if something was wrong with the car or whatever, he'd drag me outside, make me fix it, winter, summer, whatever. But in this one particular case, he came flying into the driveway. The first door, so the way it was set up is the big living room window would face the driveway and the road. Mm-hmm. So it's on Highway 3 outside of Aylmer. I still go by there because I park my truck. Anytime I'm in the area, I just park my truck and
go look.
And so first door slams. So it's like the first door, then there's like a coat rack at the end of the hallway, mm-hmm. a little closet thing, and then the next door coming in. So the way it always worked is like how hard that first door slams is going to be how hard it's going to be for the night. And so this one was unusually heavy, right? So my mom was in the room praying, and I was in the living room waiting for whatever was going to happen. So, and then it went quiet. Like it just went completely quiet. And I'm like, oh. And I waited, and the second door never opened, right? So I'm like, now I'm getting worried. I'm like, did something happen to him? And so now I'm just like, so after, I don't know how long, probably 5 minutes, because I'm still expecting him to come through the door. And I opened the door to see where he was, and I had to take a second look. He was crouched underneath the coats, and shriveled up in the corner, like he was absolutely terrified. So I went back to the living room and looked outside, and you can call me crazy, it doesn't matter, because 4 men were walking away from the house into the dark. 4 men. Whatever happened in that little room, whatever happened there, it scared the absolute out of him. He was in the corner underneath the coats, completely shriveled up, scared out of his mind. Another time, similar thing, Friday night, and I was in my room, and I was in bed, and it was so aggressive that I reacted, and I jumped out of the bedroom window and took off into the barn in the middle of winter. I remember about a foot of snow, and it was dreadfully cold. I was in my underwear, but it happened so quickly. It was a natural thing. I lifted up the window and took off outside into the barn. I spent the night in the barn, and I can tell you, like people aren't going to, they won't even believe this kind of stuff, but the barn was my refuge. It's a place where I learned to work on cars. I developed a passion for cars because that was my out. And so the barn, there was no insulation, there's nothing, just boards, cracks in them, and it's winter, middle of winter. And I spent the night in the barn, and then came back when he was passed out. the stories about the men in his life, the drunks that were in his life that would come to the house and the crazy things they would do, to show you what happened to them in the end it's a horrifying thing. How God dealt with these guys. I'm telling you.
You know, Daniel, you grew up, you know, hearing the stories and the background of your father. How did that shape you? Because it's a big load to carry.
Yeah, so like my grandfather that I knew wasn't the same person that he's talking about now. So you'll kind of have to let him finish where that all goes. But yeah, I didn't grow up in a typical fashion at all. What was priority and what mattered was very different than what my friends' their parents' priorities for them were. So I always knew that we were like very different. The way that my dad kind of, you know, raised us.
Explain,
Yeah,
you know,
so
how,
like,
because this is, you know, ultimately, this is where I want to get to.
So I was like 5 years old when I heard him and my uncle in the living room talking about Jesus coming again at some point. And you know, I'd been in church, but like at 5, what do you hear?
What do you know? Yeah, what do you know?
Right? Like I knew David and Goliath. I felt that'd be cool. I'd like to hit somebody in the head with the rock too. You know?
Yeah. Or Samson, just
exactly,
get a piece of bone and just kill a bunch of people.
So
it's like, we're all cool.
About that. So like I was probably playing with my Ninja Turtles when I heard him and my uncle talking about Jesus coming, and I've never felt so I don't know what the word is, but shocked in my whole system as a 5-year-old, thinking that I didn't want to miss that. I don't want to miss this. What does that mean to like, you know, to know this person? And then that's for me when I had asked him, like, he's there. I can feel he's there. He's telling me that I need to meet him, that I can't miss this opportunity. And so like I was 5 or 6 when I told him that like I need to know Jesus. And then that was kind of the start of the path for me in the journey with what, you know, where we were going as a family. But it wasn't until later that I heard stories about who my grandfather was. You obviously not going to tell me that as a child.
Yeah, of course.
But it's funny that you were in a Pentecostal situation. We grew up in a PAOC church, is the Pentecostal Association of Ontario.
Yeah.
And he was the youth pastor there. So I was at church at least 4 times a week growing up.
Yeah,
so
that was pretty much us.
Yeah.
And, you know, it was twice during the week, and it was literally twice on Sundays. Sunday school in the morning, and then we had mass at nighttime.
Yeah.
That was around 7:30, 8 o'clock, and it would carry on forever, depending on how many people would convert that night.
And twice on Sundays, right?
Yeah.
So Sunday morning was Sunday school. Sunday night was, you know, the evening message, and Friday night was youth group. When I got old enough, even when I wasn't old enough, he would drive the church bus. So he bought a church bus to go into like the more ghetto areas of Mississauga and just pick up kids to go to church. So he started this whole bus ministry in this church where, again, it's like if people are not going out and like telling people about Jesus or putting it out there for them to come, then why would somebody come? So he went and found, you know, kind of the worst buildings in the Mississauga area, and he set up a bus there and started praying. And by the time I was a teenager, that was a huge ministry. There was like hundreds of kids coming to church on Sunday mornings, and then Friday nights for youth. And then that became my youth, was like hanging out at church with all my buddies were like, who grew up in, you know, horrible situations, and you know, found some type of refuge
in a church.
Church. Yeah.
Now, were your brothers involved in all of this?
Yeah, I was just the oldest, so I had the most like.
I thought Michael was the oldest.
No, I know.
He behaves like the oldest.
He does. And yeah, it's not the first time. Yeah, not to say I'm super immature, but
no, he's just very stoic and serious, right?
Yeah. So, no, I spent my every every extra moment I was not in school, and a lot of moments when I should have been in school, I spent with him from the time I was like 3 years old. So he would take me in his truck, and I would go on routes with him. And he had like the trucks where there's like the beds in the back if you had to do overday hauls and stuff. And I would hang out in the beds with whatever toys I had. And so I spent my whole childhood with my dad, like every moment and beyond. Like he didn't have an education. So he clearly didn't care whether I was getting an education either, because if I was like, I'd rather go to work with him, he's like, perfect. And then he would put me to work. I would clean out trailers. I would, once I got older, I would spend my summers like cleaning all his trucks and all his trailers. And I would learn how to earn. When I was in grade 8, he would wake me up at 3 a.m. in the morning because he had snowplow contracts, and he would take me with him, and I would shovel all the sidewalks while he did all the parking lots. And then he would take me, we get this huge breakfast, and I would go to school and I'd sleep in school. So his version of education was very different, or what he thought was important for education was very different than what we were doing.
Do you think that your dad's lack of emphasis on traditional education had a big impact on the type of man that all three of you turned out?
Oh, 100%. I didn't do any of the traditional schooling stuff. I pulled myself out of school after grade 9. I'm like, I don't want to be here. I don't like these, like, I don't like the person I was becoming, because I was starting to get sucked into all the stuff that everybody was doing and what it meant to be, cool or whatever. I love sports, so I played rugby. I was a great athlete. And it was probably the only year that White Oaks had a good rugby team. We won. We came second at OFSA that one year. It was like the greatest thing ever.
I'm sure that Nick is going to disagree with that one.
That was the crowning moment of my whole high school. And then I said, I'm out, and I didn't go back. I did what I needed to do for homeschooling, and then I went to work with him. And I went to work from the time I was in grade 10.
Did your brothers do the same thing as you did?
No, Mike didn't get any. Mike went through high school. Mike was an awesome athlete too. Yeah. So he enjoyed the whole process. Me and Mike were very different, and we're still different in this way. I'm very more sensitive towards how people are. Mike does not care. And Mike was like a super athlete. So everybody looked up to him, and he kind of ran his grade of friends and stuff like that. I wasn't like that. I was more like low key. I'm more sensitive to how people are and feel and stuff like that. And I didn't like that I was getting pulled into what they thought was the norm of life.
It's interesting that you see Michael that way, because for the audience here, these are 3 brothers. Nathan, Michael, and Dan here, and I'm a friend with all 3 of them. They actually, they're quite annoying, to be perfectly honest with the audience, because they set a standard that I don't have. Honestly, they, like I said at the beginning of the show, they're bullying me into becoming a better version of myself. And, when you think of all the things that you need to give up to become a better version of yourself, a lot of people shy away from being that better version. But it's funny because I don't see Michael that way. I don't see Michael as the not caring person. On the contrary, I think that there is a hard shell, but it's not very thick.
No, yeah, no.
Because you don't have to scratch too deep to get to a soft, gentle, genuine,
100%.
loving, caring core that is overwhelming, dude.
No, and I think what I meant by that was like he doesn't care what people think about what he believes.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
So like
So you did.
I care.
I see. What you're saying.
And it's could be a human fault of mine, or I've always been more of a sensitive type of person towards how people see me and how just the reaction to who I am to them. Whereas he's very good at like knowing what he believes, and like, good luck. I'm telling you, you've met the nicest guy and the most stubborn human being, all wrapped up in the same person in my brother Mike, which is like a phenomenal thing when your life's in the right direction. And I feel like he could handle being in high school and around that kind of stuff without getting dragged into you know, being somebody he didn't want to be. I saw myself starting to become somebody that I didn't want to be.
I see what you're saying.
And that's when I was like, you know what, I'm out. And I was good with being out. I'm like, I was a good student. That's the other thing. I didn't have to study and I got 80s. Like I always understood what was going on. I always understood what they wanted out of me. I never had any joy in it, like most people, you know, like I couldn't wait to get on the rugby field. Like that's why I was there. So I wanted something more out of my life. I didn't want to waste the next 3 or 4 years being pulled into, and who knows what I would have become if I kept going down the path of just, you know, whatever it was.
Where does your youngest brother fit into this whole
Yeah.
makeup of the Thiesen family?
He's the softest of the three of us.
Oh, wow. Nathan, I will defend your honor, man. I have to disagree with you on that one, man.
So,
Nathan is he is a rock, dude.
Yeah.
He's solid.
He's 5 years younger than me. So my relationship with Mike was like best friends. We were we're a year and 10 months apart. We did everything together until he got married, and then Colleen ruined our whole lives. But
it's all Colleen's fault.
Yeah. But yeah, no, Nate was 5 years younger. So Nate was like protected by both of us. I still remember Nate calling us and saying some kids from a different high school were bullying him, and me and Mike showing up and like chasing them out. You know what I mean?
Did you knock him out once?
I knocked both my brothers unconscious. Yes.
Yeah, I heard about the stories, eh?
Well, Nate,
like
they had these. I heard that you were the
UFC
bully, fight nights in the basement.
What?
And and I was like, at that point, I was fighting Muay Thai. I was taking Muay Thai fights, boxing fights. I was doing jiu-jitsu tournaments. Like I was primed. And so I was like, I'm never going down to a UFC fight night with these kids because they like take my boxing gloves and like fight each other in the basement while the UFC is going on. So I'm like, I'm never going down there. I go down there one time. And he's like taunting me, like, come on, show us what you got. Like, and then obviously no, and I'm like, Nate, I just want to watch the fights, man. Like, leave me alone. Takes my glove, hits me in the head. Like he's, you know, and I'm like, okay, we're doing
so
this.
He was that annoying back then,
yeah,
too.
Of course.
Oh,
right?
okay.
So I told him, I'm going to put one glove on my left hand. I'm going to put my right hand behind my back. You can swing. I'm going to take one punch. And he overcommitted. I took a step back, hit him with a hook, and knocked him on.
He was out.
Yeah.
Cold.
And I put the glove down and walked upstairs. I'm like, I'm done. There's no way.
So he's traumatized by that.
Yeah, I'm sure. He is. He you know, his version of the story was like I cheap shot at him somehow or whatever. But
of
whatever
course.
makes him feel good.
Yeah, that makes him feel good. And, you know, he tells me that you were the bully. But, you know, going back to Marty here for a second, you said that at the age of 18, your dad changed.
17, yeah.
17, he changed.
Yeah.
Do you feel responsible for that change in the sense that you were the instigator? I know that you feel or you believe that you were not the one that changed him.
Yeah. My life was so dependent on God that there was none of that left. Like I was so broken during that time that the only thing I had left is I was completely submissive to him, and I loved him. God only knows how much. But by the time I was 17, I was like, the only out I had in my life was cars. I'd learned to love them and fix them and do some crazy stuff to them. So that was my out. And so by the time that morning when he had his encounter at the bar at 9:00 in the morning, he was already drinking, looking for more. And he walked into and that bar is for sale now. It's on Highway 86 on the way into Elmira. And where he took his last drink, and he went into the bathroom and he just said, God, if you're there, I want you to make this stuff taste so bitter that I'll never, ever, ever take another one again. So he went back to the bar and grabbed another beer because you can't not when you're that addicted. And he said it tasted like the worst possible. When it's something that you crave so much and it tastes so good, and then it turns that much different. He literally walked out, and of course he was out without a license again. So he walked all the way up Highway 86 because the bar is in the country. It's like a restaurant bar, and we lived on a farm there. And I was I happened to be at home that day, and I was just getting into the car, and I saw a guy walking across the field from the road, and I had to take a second look to see who it was. And then when I looked at again, I'm like, oh, that's Dad. He's coming home. That's different. But I noticed something different. Like he was walking briskly, like he had
Not
somewhere
the
to go.
normal cadence that you would see out of
somewhere
him.
to go. He wasn't falling all over the place. It was like he was walking in a straight line. I said, oh, okay, this is interesting. And first time in my life, he got close. There's a fence here, and I'm waiting for him to come to the fence to see if he's okay. And he's walking straight towards me, and he embraced me for the first time in my life. And the grandpa that he knows is the next one.
Came after that.
Because from that moment till he was like 45 and he lived till 84, that's 40 years where you wouldn't find a nicer man in the world. Literally. I mean, this guy was so unbelievably grateful for God's grace. His family forgave him, which is pretty hard to, and pretty much all at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
He was just forgiven. And he had such an understanding of grace that it would just flow out of him like liquid. He would go into Tim Hortons, and especially after my mom passed, he would just, within 2 minutes, he's sitting with somebody. He's either got somebody stopping to see him, or he stops to see them, and the next thing you know, he's engaged in an incredible conversation, and he's just pouring it out. He's in his parking lot. I mean, he's just broke. He died broke. He lived broke. He never, and he's helping kids fix their bicycles. It's just a never-ending, a guy who just said, I screwed up so bad that I'm going to walk in grace, forgiven. And that's how he lived his life the rest of his life. He had 27 grandchildren.
Oh, wow.
And pictures of every one of them, prayed for them all the time. And there's just some horrific stories. Like my brother in South America, we had a piece of land that we wanted to build orphanages and stuff like that. And I was in church. Usher came over and said, there's somebody on the phone for you in the church office. And I went, and they said, we just found your brother's body. They executed him, threw his body in the ditch, poured fuel all over it, and burned it.
Where in South America?
In Bolivia. And there's just those things that shape your life.
What kept your faith so strong through such horrible times? Because you were new to the word. You were new to the path.
There was a pivotal point in school. I think I was 15 or 16. There was a pivotal point because I was taking exams and being bullied because you're a Mennonite. And I thought, while I was standing in the hallway waiting for my time to write the exam, I literally thought I was losing it. Like something was going to flip inside. And I think that was a pivotal moment, just because when I survived that moment and I walked out of there, I knew that there's nothing in the world that could separate me from God. Because, like, you understand, like, the stuff that was going on and the horrific abuse created a massive skin problem that I had. Like, there's still an after effect. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I had boils on my face. And we went to, I mean, there's none on his face, you know what I'm saying? We went to doctors and everything, and it's just the stress of the abuse and everything like that. It took a toll on me to a whole different level. And when you go to school and your face is covered in boils, you'll find out who you are. Because at that point, you either lose it and become the biggest serial killer Canada's ever seen, or you just find yourself resting in the power of who God is. And that's what happened that day. There was something that just solidified that said, God, it's like God saying to me, I'm never going to leave you, no matter what.
He never left.
Never left.
How do you deal with that?
Like,
Because, growing up in Canada, you show a sign of believing in God and you are considered to be crazy immediately.
yeah.
Immediately. You're not cool anymore. You're not part of the group. But you guys are so strong and unapologetic about your faith. You don't push it on people. I have never seen you do that. But how do you live in that world?
I think if it's something that you're just kind of faking it till you make it, then it's easy to if certain something doesn't work for you that way, it's easy to throw it off and be like, all right, it's easy if it's easier to take some type of woke narrative and it makes your life easier, then sure, why not, right? But if it's something that you believe to your core, then how could you live this life? You get one shot at a life. How could you live this life? And that's something you believe with all your heart. How could you live it as a fake at that point, or just to make yourself comfortable? You know what I mean? I was 19, so he loved cars. So when growing up, we had a couple project cars. So my first car was a '89 Mustang. It's a Fox body that we built. We built it when I was 14, 15, 16. Then I got caught driving it before I got my license. And the cop was, when he said license and registration, I said, I have a license. He said, all right. He couldn't believe it. Anyways, so I called my dad and he's like, yeah, your son. He's driving your car. And he's like, you stole your dad's car. This is stolen property now. And so he came and he talked the cop out of charging me and all kinds of stuff. Told him that I was going to work driving a straight truck and I needed to get I was going to get my license in 2 days. He's going to get his license in 2 days, so they didn't do anything. But we loved cars. So when I was 19, we had bought a Cobra, and that was the Mustang Cobra at that time. Is like a supercharged 4.6 liter, and then that came with 390 horsepower, and then we spent some money on it. So I had 550 wheel horsepower, and at that time it was stupid fast. And I was out at a friend's house late, and I'll never forget this. I was driving home in Lower Baseline in Trafalgar. You know where that is?
Yeah.
Out in the country. So you go past the 407. And I pulled up to the Trafalgar light on Lower Baseline, and the light was red. So I was waiting there. And I remember thinking, as soon as this light turns green, it's 1 a.m. As soon as this light turns green, I'm going to hammer this car. I'm going to go down to...
We all did that on Trafalgar.
I'm just I'm going to I'm going hard, I'm just one of those
Still
moments.
do sometimes.
Yeah, still do. And I remember watching, okay, it's going to turn green. And I'll never forget this voice say, and it said my name. It said, Daniel, don't go. And I couldn't even go because I was so stunned. And the light turned green, and as soon as the light turned green, a tractor trailer was coming down Trafalgar, over 100, right through the lights, right in front of my face, where I would have gone right through, taken my car right in half. I drove through the light after that. I was driving at 5 kilometers an hour, and I pulled off into the side, and I cried for 20 minutes. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't move. I was shaking. And I'll never forget that voice. And that's how you can't not live the way that you're meant to live. If that, why was I given the opportunity? I could have been that kid on the newspaper, dead. Tractor trailer ran right through him.
When you hear testimonies like this, and they're so real, what do you think that is happening to Christianity? Because there are so many people that have moved away from it. And I know that there is a giant void out there that they've been trying to fill with social media, with porn, with things, with money, with music, with drugs, what do you say to them? Like, how can you bring people back to where they belong, to a place that is safe? I'll tell you, man, I don't know how I feel about religion, and that hasn't changed, because religion means so many different things to different people. But what I've been feeling over the last little while, I can't explain it. And I know a lot of people that listen to my show for so many years are going to say, what's happening to you, Carrasco?
I remember sitting in Nissan in your office, and me and you just having conversations, and you know how unapologetic you were about what you believed in God, and you knew what I believed, but you're honest with me, which I appreciate. Yeah, it's interesting. Like when you sent me the video when you and Nick were sitting here and watching that and looking back, and I've even had conversations about you with my dad. And I would be like, Dad, I don't know if he'll ever, like, he's very, I'm like, I want Greg to know God, but I don't know, man. He's locked in. But he would tell me that he's like, God has a bigger purpose for those guys. And he would tell me that. And I was like, it would check me being like, who am I to judge this guy, And I wasn't judging. I was just like thinking like, man, like you really believe what you believe. And, but I feel like when I was there with you, I would never try to push it on you, because I would just listen to you, because I felt like you needed to talk it out. You needed to talk those things through yourself. And so I would just listen most of the time,
Somebody said to me once that there is no greater enemy than somebody that used to be your friend. And there is no better friend than somebody that used to be your enemy. What I have felt over the last few weeks, and I've shared this with a few people, is because, I was baptized when I was 14. I was baptized in my Pentecostal church. And when I moved to Canada, I was a deeply religious person, just like you. And I think that I was looking for God in the wrong places. And when you look for something in the wrong places and you don't find it, you blame it on God. But you were the one that was lost in the first place. But then again, you go back into the whole notion that whenever the student is ready, the teacher appears.
Yeah. And I think there's a big difference between religion and faith. I think I believe that so much of what we think of religion is dead. It's not alive. And I believe faith is alive and living. I believe that if you read your Bible and you watch what Jesus went through, I believe that the Pharisees, that was religion. And that was people trying to do it in their own power. And when you leave people up to their own power, look what we end up with. People like those who are judging everybody else, even though when you go into their closet, it's filled with crap.
And I think that
that's why that's why I said I just let you speak.
I think that, yesterday I went to the men's group that your dad holds on Saturday. So I don't know what's happening to me, man. Been in that church twice this week.
Yeah, twice in 1 week.
There's something happening here.
And you texted me a picture of a Bible.
Yeah, honestly, I had a post ready, right? Yeah. Nothing tells you that you're a gentle soul more than a Bible and cauliflower ears.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah, exactly.
I had it ready to post on social media, but then I thought, I don't want to be careful with what I say, because I'm not going to say that a full shift has happened. Mm-hmm. No, I would be lying to you and to everyone.
It's better to be honest
than
to fake something.
But I can tell you something even more true than that it seems like whatever change is happening, I can't stop it. I can't. Because everything is just pointing me in a direction. Everything is pointing me in a direction that I don't want to go. I'm resisting it. I was resisting it. I fought it for such a long time. But, and I was talking to my wife on the way here, and I feel that, I was sharing this with her that, back home in our little house, there was a poster of a depiction of what life as a Christian was like. And there was a group of people and two roads, like one very wide and open. There was money, there were naked women, there was drinks and people dancing and all this, and it was wide and it was fun. And there was another very narrow that it was just steps on a steady climb up, hard. Often it was alone. You couldn't go with anyone. And it's so difficult to give up what the world gives you as a substitute for happiness, because it's not happiness. It's the thing. There's a shot of dopamine that you get. It's so difficult to give those things up, and I think that there's a lot of people out there that they don't want to give them up because it's so easy. And
that's another problem with our society, though, is that we just want to be comfortable. People want to be comfortable. People don't want to be uncomfortable. I have to make a living trying to make people uncomfortable every single day. It's not an easy way to make a living, Greg. I don't think if I wasn't called to do something like this, I would do something else, because it'd be so easy to make money doing it. I'm used to make tons of money just driving a straight truck for him.
Yeah.
But now I have to convince somebody that they need to come into my gym every single day and get uncomfortable, because without that feeling of uncomfortable, they'll never actually truly be healthy or reach their potential. And everybody fights that feeling of uncomfortableness. But what happened if we just embraced it and went along with that? And for me, honestly, lately in my life, I had to start getting uncomfortable again in my spiritual life. As I was too comfortable just being, and I felt God was pulling me to be more. And I was putting so much emphasis on the physical side of my life. And I became so one-sided as a person that, all the physical stuff I was really, really good at. And it was if that became comfortable, I could get uncomfortable in a gym real quick and be super comfortable with it. I did stuff in that gym that nobody will ever do again. I rode that Echo bike for 12 hours straight, like a real psychopath.
You're a little bit crazy.
Yeah, at a
lot
pace
crazy.
that nobody, I think there might be a very small population of human beings that could have done something like that. So I was super comfortable being there, but I was never taking myself into an uncomfortable spot in my spiritual life anymore. And now I feel like God's changing that. I was so obsessive over the physical side of things, and I justified it under health. You know what I mean? It's not like I was doing crack. You can't really justify crack, but that was my crack.
I need to ask you something for the two of you. Like Trump is trying to make America great again.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
How do we make Christianity cool again?
But
How?
Here's a question for you. Can it be cool?
I think you can.
Okay.
I think you can.
But by whose standards then?
I think that you see, and this is
it's hard, right? If I tell my buddies, and I have lots of friends who do all kinds of stuff. But if I tell them like my Friday night is like at 8:30 bedtime because I'm getting up early to hit a workout and then coach my son's baseball team, it's not like the coolest kind of vibe for them. Like, even if they just want to go watch the UFC fight, and what's more important to me now is my son and my health and stuff like that.
Well, I think that the coolness that I speak of is to be comfortable with being uncomfortable in the fact that you don't know things.
Yeah.
Because I think that the standards, and that's one of the reasons why I moved away from church and religion, is because they set a standard so high that everybody failed before they even begun, but they couldn't even hold their own standards.
Exactly.
And then you saw them outside the church, like, wait a second, you're asking me to do this and you don't do it.
Oh.
So why should I? And then it became a confrontation. It's like, I'm not doing this. I'm sorry, man. It's a lie.
Yeah, it's a lie.
It's a lie.
100%.
But now, look, I was telling you this the other day that I don't even know how to speak religion in English, because the last time I spoke religion, it was in Spanish,
yeah.
almost 40 years ago. And, but last time I checked, Jesus didn't judge people. Like he said, come to me as you are, So why do we tell them, oh, if you do this, you're going to hell. If you do that, you're going to hell. If you do this, you're going to hell. Who am I to judge?
No, and you're not, and neither am I. That's why I never I don't want to be that person. And honestly, as a human being, you can get caught up in those type of things, and but I've caught myself judging people. But God quickly reminds me how much I needed Him, and without Him, that there's no way I could be anything. You know what I mean? The Bible says, like, take the speck out of your own eye before you start taking stuff out of other people's eye. You know what I mean?
I want to put you uncomfortable now, the two of you, because it's an important conversation. When I left here, that conversation that I had with Nick, there was a massive protest on Dundas and Kiel and Dundas. Abortion is murder. You're a murderer. Abortion is sin. You're going to hell. I've reflected on that on the way home because I had a pretty intense, Nick, I have to say this to you, man, and I said it to you on the phone. The day I was having that conversation with him, he asked the only question that he could have asked me that day. He says, "Is this the first time that you're saying it out loud? Do you remember that?" And it solidifies something that I felt when I met you the first time. So I was pretty worked up when I left here. And I was trying to find a place of homeostasis in my own brain in relation to what I'm feeling, because I raised my children to be atheists. I raised them to question everything. I raised them to believe in nothing other than themselves. That's the way that I raised them. That was a challenge, because I shared with them over Thanksgiving that I was coming to church for the first time, and they looked at me as if I had three heads. You were there in those conversations. But, after looking at the signs, I said abortion is murder. And I think that when you ask most people what you think of abortion, most people are not pro-abortion. Abortion is a gruesome thing. But the way I feel towards it is that that's a terrible decision that somebody needs to make. And it's between them and God. It's none of my business to judge them.
No, I agree.
Because if we are going after the sick, if we're going after the drug addict, if we are going after the poor, if we're going after the dejected, the isolated, the abandoned, if we are going after the abused, if we're going after all those people, and you want to show them a better way, you don't judge them first.
No.
You do not judge them first. You make them feel safe.
Yep.
That's what Jesus would have done,
You would never catch me in an abortion rally holding one of those signs. And also, if you look at Jesus' life, right, and you look at the time when the Bible talks about him getting angry, who did he get angry with? And a justified anger.
Yes, at the market.
He got
the
mad,
rich people,
he got
yes.
mad at the people who were abusing people or taking advantage of people in the church. That's who he got mad at. Who do you think Jesus would get mad at if he was here today? You think he's going to be on the street condemning them to hell? No. He's going to be the first person in the church telling them, "What have you done to my Father's house?" That's what Christians should be scared of. They should be scared of that encounter that one day, because we're all going to die and we're all going to meet him one day. Are you afraid of what he's going to tell you at the end of all that?
I'm going to share this with you guys, with you both. I'm afraid. I've never been so afraid in my life. More so than when I left Chile, more so than at any other time growing in the streets of Santiago. Because for the first time in really over 3 decades, the direction that my life is going, it tells me that if I'm going to do this, I need to hold myself to a higher standard. But that is quite possibly one of the most difficult things that any man can do, to hold yourself to a higher standard when no one is watching. It's very easy to do shitty things when nobody's watching. He says, who's going to know? Mm-hmm. They're going to know. Who's going to know? Isn't there a meme about that?
Yeah.
And that's terrifying to me, because I like to think that I've led a pretty good life, straight life. I try not to hurt anyone on purpose. But God knows I'm not perfect. No. And now you need to walk a straight line. That's a hard bill to pay. So how do you bring people that are making these mistakes, that are living a life that is not something that you would want your kids to see or know about when they grow old? How do you bring those people and make them reconcile with the fact that there is a better way? How do you do it?
Well, you brought up a fantastic point, because what you do, the way of Jesus' teaching is that you raise the standard for yourself, just like you said, but you change the standard that you have towards others. So let me give you an example. You're talking about the people that had the signs up. Well, what we did in the church was there was dozens of girls that were facing the decision of abortion. We never judged anybody. That we allowed them to talk their way through it. If they needed counseling, if they wanted to talk about it, and if they went ahead and did the thing, we didn't condemn them to eternity in hell.
It's none of our business.
It's not God's way. But on the other hand, on the flip side of that, you're talking about holding yourself up to a higher standard. Get this: if you read the Sermon on the Mount, which is, I spent 3.5 years on that sermon. It's only 3 chapters in the book of Matthew. Jesus says, you've committed adultery when you've looked at a woman to lust after her. That's already adultery.
Mm-hmm.
But see, what Jesus did was incredible at doing is he raised the standard to where it was supposed to be. But then the standard that he raised comes with grace. And so that means that when you raise that standard for yourself, you don't inflict that on others. You raise that standard and you live it by the grace of God. When you think about Job said, I've made a covenant with my eyes not to look at a woman the wrong way. Well, what's he talking about? Well, what he's saying is, if I'm struggling with my eyes, I'm going to struggle with it with all kinds of things down the road, and eventually that could lead to adultery. So I'm going to deal with it on that level. I went through a horrifying time in my life where, as a Mennonite kid, and there's no television in your home and none of that. I saw the first naked girl on the calendar, and it drove me nuts. I went through a period where I
think we all went through that.
It was just a crazy dark time for me. And it's just like, eventually God saw me through that. And now I can honestly say that I don't struggle with porn. I don't struggle with any of that stuff because he delivered from me. But I'm not going to judge the guy that's struggling with it.
So how to become less judgmental, more loving, and setting up a different standard? Now that's where the secret is.
Yeah.
Matthew 5, 6, and 7, sorry.
Yeah, go.
Matthew 5, 6, and 7. Read that until you're blue in the face, because it redefines how our relationship with God is. It redefines how you trust him, how you count on him. It redefines how you give, with what motivation you give. It redefines your relationship with your enemy. It redefines your relationship with your friend. You can actually get to a point where you can bless your enemy. You can actually bless your enemy. Does that sound like a judgmental thing? That's the worst person in my life right now is somebody you know. And I can't hate him. I literally can't hate him.
I had a big problem because I was ready to kill him. And that's a horrible place.
And I'm talking about, I could charge him with extortion. I could charge him with all kinds of stuff, because this guy literally made up story after story of a story that he's being killed by somebody to come up with another $5,000, $10,000, to the point where I'm like, okay, you know what? Soon I won't have a home to go to, because my wife's going to lock the door on me and change the locks. And so finally it came to a point where it's like, okay, well, this is clearly just a complete manipulation thing there, but I don't hate him. And the last conversation I had with him, I said, the one I'm worried about is you, because I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that God's got my back. And I know that I loved you since you were 11 years old. And I know I've done everything I could possibly do to help you. I'm not worried about me. I'm worried about you. And I'm worried about what God's going to do to you. So I'm asking you, reconsider what you're doing, because I don't need to hire a bully to come after you. I know some fighters that will put you down in a hurry, and, a guy that's big and thinks he's tough, they'll embarrass you to a point of whatever. But what's that going to do? I could also go crazy and try to hurt the guy. But what if I just do it the way Jesus said to do it? If I bless my enemy, I heap coals of, I literally place him in the presence of God and say, God, you can do what you want to do with him. I'm free and clear from it. And then he replaces that money that he extorted.
And I think you're right. And about how people get turned off from Christianity and how certain Christians act. If you're holy, or if you act like you got all together and holy, then you've missed the whole point, man. If you can honestly take a look in your own heart and see and know that God's the reason why that you are forgiven and that you are, that, you know, you can live the way you do, then you'll never judge another person again. And it's hard, and it's not going to be easy. That's the other thing. Jesus never said it was going to be easy. Jesus never said, come to me so I can make your life the easiest thing. It's no. Look what his disciples went through. Every one of them was killed for their faith. So it was never about being easy.
What do you say to somebody in closing that knows that there is a void and you know what they can find on the other side? What do you say to somebody that has been struggling with their own faith in order for them to open themselves up and give this a try? What would you say to somebody?
I go back to my the thing that was on my heart this morning at church.
That was very good, by the way.
You know what? If the crushing in my life, if the crushing that happens in my life becomes food for someone else, they might take a look. Right? Otherwise, it's just empty. My experience that I have, the furthest I'm going to go with this, I'm going to share it with you because I trust you, because I love you. And I hope it's nutrition. Because you know what? When it comes to judging, I have to worry about myself only. I have to stand before God only. And that's the only thing I'm worried about. The rest of it, it's like you were away from God for whatever period of time. Maybe God designed it that way. Maybe God took you on a journey so far out that way.
How many years has it been?
Yeah, it was 32, 33 years it's been.
So Moses spent 40 years in the
desert. Yep.
You know what I'm saying? Like some of us are just more stubborn, man. Maybe, you know, but look what Moses led the people to the promised land, Greg. Maybe it's just, you know, it's taken some time. But who has the bigger testimony talking to an atheist, me or you? I have no idea what it's like to be an atheist. I've known God since I was 5 years old, man. I couldn't. The funny thing is the kid who's known him since 5 years old is the kid who's sitting in your office just listening to the atheist, you know, tell him that God's not there. But who better to talk to those guys than you, man? You've been there. You know what they're feeling. You know what I mean? I had no idea. That's why I didn't talk much. I could only listen because I didn't live your life experience. I was born in Canada. It's been pretty easy, man.
You know,
except for those 3 a.m. mornings I had to shovel snow at 8 years old. That was not
The richest man that ever lived on the planet and the smartest at the same time walked away from God for a very long time, but he came back. Because you know what? When you've experienced the other side and you realize the emptiness and the void, even the little bit that you had before you left, you know it was real. And that is the difference. God is not someone who's going to literally just give himself to everyone and let him stomp all over it, but he will give himself to those that seek him. And you know what? Those that are honest enough to be real. He has no respect for the Pharisee, the ugliest person on the planet that I ever was, because the part that came out of my experience was that I thought that I was a good guy by being good to my dad. And one day God said, you know what, now you had to go through all of that, but now I've got to take you on a journey to show you that you're no better.
What a better way to come to an end to this. Marty, thank you so much for being here and for being so candid and open with your story. That's books are written out of that. And Daniel, thank you so much for being here on that last minute notice. But
it's crazy because we're in church. Sorry, I know you're wrapping up,
okay.
But we're in church. This morning I'm like, okay, I got my son's baseball gear all packed up because I'm like, I'm leaving church at 11:30 to because I help coach the team. He can't be late for practice. I'm leaving at 11:30. It's 11:15. I'm sitting there and Rach is out in the lobby with the twins, and I'm like, oh man, I can't go today. I got to stay here. I don't know why, but I'm staying here today. I text her. I'm like, you got to take Malachi to baseball. I have to stay. And she's like, okay. And otherwise I wouldn't have talked to you after service. I wouldn't. Yeah. There's a reason for everything, man. Sometimes you just gotta listen.
Yeah, and sometimes people just whisper in your ear. But thank you so much for being here, folks. Look, you've been listening to my stuff for a very, very long time, and I hate people who claim they have the monopoly on truth, and I don't want to be one of them. And I'm not saying that I have found what I'm looking for yet, because I still don't know what my ultimate purpose is. But I decided that I was going to entertain the possibility that I maybe was wrong, that maybe I was going down the wrong path, and just like this young man inspired me to do, which is to hold myself to a higher standard. What's wrong with that? Our world is not headed in the right direction. We see it every day. Turn the news on. You want to get depressed? Put CNN on it. It'll tell you. So what's wrong with a little bit of message of hope? What's wrong with a bit of message of togetherness and camaraderie and understanding and acceptance and forgiveness? I don't know. I don't know if I see anything wrong with that. I've struggled with God for a long time. That's a formidable opponent, if you ask me. And I seem to be, in the process of losing that struggle, I seem to be winning, which is a very odd thing. So, I don't know what you're going to get out of this. But if a heart as hard as mine for so long can be a little softer after a few conversations, I'm sure that yours can be too. Anyways, I hope you enjoy this. Subscribe. Greg Carrasco here. Out.